For the event itself, actually the night before the event, Sargon came over and sat down next to me with about 3 or 4 people standing around us. We were at a party, a pre-convention party, and we talked for about an hour and a half, which, by the way, is longer than I can talk to one of the organizers without having to have a moderator. And as long as we were talking about philosophy geek stuff and free will and morality and things like that, we were able to have a fairly productive conversation, and there were people asking questions. But at the end of the conversation, we decided to talk about his tweet. He tweeted at a member of parliament, "I wouldn't even rape you." And prior to this, he had mentioned that he identifies as a humanist. And so my question was, how is that tweet remotely consistent with humanism? I still don't have an answer, and I'm still of the opinion that it's not remotely consistent with humanism. Because at that point, and granted, he'd had quite a few beers, so maybe he wasn't thinking clearly, but he tried to defend it and tried to argue about the point that he was making. Oh, well, I just wanted to show that if I made something that clearly wasn't a threat, that they would still take it as a threat. Okay, well, that doesn't prove the point that you really wanted. See, this MP wanted to impose restrictions and policies on internet usage to decrease misogyny and bullying, and Sargon was opposed to that policy, felt it was overreaching. And I asked, well, then why not address the actual policy? Ah, he says, they won't listen. Oh, okay, so because you're convinced they won't listen, you're now justified as a humanist in tweeting, "I wouldn't even rape you." And then he explains that he spent 2 hours toiling over whether to include the word "even" there. Because "I wouldn't rape you" versus "I wouldn't even rape you" does change some context. Neither of them is a threat to actually do this. Including the word "even" basically, as he acknowledges it, transitions it into more closer to the realm of "you're too ugly to screw." All of which is, I find, despicable and counter to humanism. And in his attempts to continue to try to justify this, he went into a rant about virtue signaling and bourgeoisie bubble creations and how you're going to ostracize this person over here because they don't share your values. And that's fundamentally wrong because somebody like Hitler can come along and scoop up all those people you've ostracized and create a worse. It was terrible. And in pointing out that I focus on trying to find ways to actually change people's minds, he decided that the best thing he could do was to say, look, this person sitting right across from you, they're a Nazi and they're not going to change their mind. Therefore, your methods are ineffective. And I was like, thank you for the circular argument. That's a tautology. I can't change unchangeable minds. Correct. But that's not necessarily the situation. You don't get to manufacture a fictional, this person mind can't be changed, to decry my methods, to say that my methods won't work. Because there are people whose minds probably won't be changed or not changed right away or not by me. But if there's 2 people sitting here, I can't tell which of them has an unchangeable mind. And so I'm going to treat them both as if their minds can be changed because that's what I believe to be the case. And even if I can't do it, somebody else might. And if neither of us can do it, maybe excluding them might make them reconsider stuff and change something fundamentally such that their mind no longer becomes unchangeable. The point is, we sat there for a long time and had a conversation which ended with actually it didn't end with circular arguments. It nearly ended with a bunch of circular arguments that he denied were circular, that he was using to defend a point which was completely irrelevant to whether or not, if somebody wants to implement policy on the internet, whether it's better to engage with the actual policy and make objections, or if you should just tweet something like, "I wouldn't even rape you," and whether or not you can consider yourself a humanist when you do that. And then at the end of the argument, despite the fact that earlier on we had talked about, number of followers doesn't tell you anything, he literally said, well, I've got 10 times the followers you do, which means you failed, and I've collected those people. which ironically puts him in the position of Hitler compared to his analogy of scooping up the people that I've ostracized. And it's irrelevant, and that's when I got up and walked off. If you're going to just make a bunch of circular arguments, if you're going to try to justify despicable, disgusting, not particularly useful comments that you make, mockery, instead of conversation, and then you're going to bring up something irrelevant like who has more followers, as if I care. And as we'll find out in a minute, I'm pretty sure I don't want his followers.